Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Co-Greening Tools and Approaches for Inclusive Governance of Urban Nature. My name is Mariana Binder. I'm a Senior Project Officer at the Institute for Urban Excellence. I will be your hostess today. I'm here with my colleague Tania Pico, who's a project manager also at the Institute for Urban Excellence. We are very happy to have organized this webinar together with our colleagues from the Technical University of Munich and from the JUSTNature Project. We have also counted with the support of the Laboratorio di Simulazione Urbana, which is part of the Faculty of Architecture at the Polytechnic University of Milan, and the support of the What's That Green community. So welcome all, and thank you for your support. Today, we will be discussing inclusive approaches to the governance of urban greening interventions. We will explore what environmental and social justice mean in these types of interventions. And we will be presenting the Co-Greening Handbook, which is a guide with resources for practitioners and researchers. The contents of this webinar today have been largely informed by our learnings deploying nature-based solutions as part of the JUSTNature project. JUSTNature was a European project funded by the Horizon 2020 program. My colleagues will tell you more about it in just a bit, but the project ended in February this year after 4.5 years of joint work. Most importantly, I would say the Co-Greening Handbook was also developed in the context of the project, so it was one of its outputs. I would like to now introduce our speakers. We have Eleanor Chapman with us. Eleanor is a doctoral researcher at the Chair for Strategic Landscape Planning and Management in the Technical University of Munich in Germany. Her research explores the politics of urban green space development with a focus on place-based participation and its potential to shape new democratic spaces for socio-ecological transformation. We also have Beatriz Cawarc-Fontes with us today. Beatriz is a postdoctoral researcher, also at the Chair for Strategic Landscape Planning and Management in the Technical University of Munich, as well as in the Department of Open Space Planning in the University of Kassel, also in Germany. Her research explores urban experimentation and cross-actor collaborations for the development of more urban nature, and she especially focuses on living labs, collaborative governance, and knowledge transfer, and their potential to shape new democratic practices for a sustainable urban transformation. Welcome both. We also have Alice Ryle with us. Alice is an urban geographer. She strives to bring more biodiverse urban nature into public spaces. She led the biodiversity and nature-based solutions team at eClay Europe, and now works at the City of Munich's Green and Space Planning Department. She coordinated the JUSTNature interventions in the City of Munich, of course. And last but not least, we have Agnes Jorfi. Agnes is an economist with a special dedication to sustainability and climate issues. She works as a project manager for the municipality of Szombathely in Hungary, mostly coordinating transnational projects related to environmental and climate challenges, just like the JUSTNature project, where she led and coordinated the interventions in Szombathely. Thank you all for being here with us. So I would now like to give the floor to Eleanor. Please go ahead. You can share your screen and start the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much, Mariana. I hope you can all hear me. Yes, as Mariana mentioned, we'll be introducing you today to the Co-Greening Handbook and essentially using it as a platform to discuss concepts and methods in relation to collaboration and equity in urban greening projects. So I'll literally be using an interactive online version of the handbook and walking through it. Just to let you know, this is a short form version. So yeah, the full longer version of the handbook, which you'll receive a link to at the end of the presentations today, includes quite a bit more content and interactive features. Just for time purposes, we won't get into all of it today. So you're seeing a kind of a snapshot. So don't be surprised when you get the link and find that it's a little bit different inside. Just to start very quickly, which yeah, in fact, is some detail that Mariana already introduced. So I'll just very quickly recap. JUSTNature was a practice-based research project exploring the intersection of justice and urban greening. So there we've been active in city practice labs in 7 European cities. And the project, as Mariana already mentioned, came to an end earlier this year in February. So a lot of what has become this handbook essentially is a collective experience based on what we learnt through trying out different approaches and methods in the JUSTNature project. Just to give you a bit of a sense of where the action took place. So as mentioned, 7 different cities throughout Europe, including Munich, where I'm based. And in the context of the project, each city team had the opportunity to implement a particular urban greening project. And you can see there were all kinds of projects represented, including street spaces, public spaces, rooftops, buildings, and a few cities dealt with schoolyards, which is a particular experience that you'll hear more about later today from Alice in Munich and Agnes in Szombathely. But yeah, perhaps to start from first principles, and I saw already that many people here are already familiar with the concept of collaborative governance, which is great. So I won't spend much time on this, but I think it's important to mention a couple of points about why urban nature needs better collaboration. So one point is that such projects, such greening projects like those I just showed you, are often considered technical solutions focused on objectives to improve environmental performance, maybe urban cooling, improving urban biodiversity. But the reality is people are involved. So it may seem obvious, but quite often the people who are implementing and using these interventions are not actively involved in their creation. And that can be a problem because often things don't work out as planned. So we really need a more people-centered approach. And this is not news, actually. It's something that has been known for quite some time and yet still presents a problem. People face difficulties in practice doing things more collaboratively. And one of the reasons for that is that there are established working processes, ways of doing things that tend to be the more traditional, top-down, hierarchical governance approaches. And yeah, not only can that lead to challenges in the implementation, but what often happens is that existing injustices are simply not addressed in the context of such projects. And this is important because urban nature, like many other goods and services within cities, is not evenly or equitably distributed. And the related decision making that goes into that often doesn't translate to equitable representation of the people affected. So this was a really key objective of JUSTNature, to address both more equitable processes and outcomes. And our approach was to really make efforts to shift approaches towards more collaborative ways of doing things in each municipal team. But what we found is that in practice, every team began at a different starting point. So different levels of knowledge, different kinds of resources, different kinds of local barriers to doing projects more collaboratively and equitably. This was something that we that we faced as a challenge in terms of trying to introduce these quite abstract concepts of collaborative governance and justice into the local realities of our city teams. And at the start of the project, we literally asked the question, so when you hear the word co-governance, what do you think of? And the word cloud above gives a bit of a snapshot of the answers we received. So you can see that there are many different ideas, quite fragmented, not necessarily a shared understanding. Participation emerged very strongly as a concept that people associated with collaborative governance, which is not a problem per se, unless you consider that participation is another kind of abstract concept. It takes place on a spectrum. Not every kind of participation is necessarily about collaboration and shared decision making. So we really wanted to shift the dial towards a kind of participation that does consider power imbalances, that moves towards power sharing and genuine collaboration. And the quote on the top right hand side illustrates that we did encounter quite some difficulties with what this really means and what that really means in practice. And the interest was really in what kinds of concrete strategies people could take in their own working environments, in their in connection with the sites where they were active, to make green space planning and management more socially just and to change existing governance arrangements. So very quickly, this is what the guide looks like. It's divided into 4 parts. We begin with understanding the concept of just collaborative governance. Secondly, setting up your collaborative environment. Thirdly, developing a roadmap. And finally, implementing that roadmap. And the guidance we provide is supported by 10 tools, which are all tools and methods that were developed by us and others from the JUSTNature project and tried out in the context of the project. With that, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Beatrice to begin to take us through the guide.
Thank you, Eleanor. And hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. Yes, I will be talking a little bit about understanding just collaborative governance. So exactly what is co-governance? What do we mean when we talk about co-governance also in relation to UrbanNature? So for us at JUSTNature, this meant a process of various actors, stakeholders, or people coming together to understand, set up, and achieve shared objectives together to transform our urban environments into more sustainable and nature-positive places. This means that working in practice, this means that you are working across departments within a municipality, you are engaged in local community, and you are involving academia and the private sector to bring all their knowledge and perspectives together to foster multifunctionality, strengthen effectiveness, foster collaboration, stewardship, and long-term sustainability. In this way, everybody has a voice and you have a much more just way of approaching governance of UrbanNature. Just important to highlight that when we talk about co-governance, this is not just informing the local community, but is actually actively having them as partners and part of the decision. So they are really with you during the decision-making process. Also, when we talk about co-governance, not collaborating with everyone at all times, because this is quite challenging, this is quite almost impossible to bring so many people at one time, at all times together. But we mean that actively having them in a structured and transparent ways where they can collaborate, they can give their voice, and they can influence the decision that is happening throughout the project. And when we talk about co-governance, this is also not involved just the design phase, but all the phases of the project. So from the planning, the conception, to the actual design, implementation, and management. So all that goes from the life cycle of our intervention. And when we talk about people, exactly, how would we engage, who to engage? We are talking about diverse actors When we talk about municipal public sector, we talk about municipal departments or government bodies that might have a say in the project, but that might have also some know-how about that situation, about that location. We are also talking about local and small and medium business that might be working in the topic or are affected by the intervention. This can be from, for example, landscape architecture firms or engineering firms, as well as to this local shop that is right there in front of your project or in front of in the neighborhood. We are also talking about involving academia as well as NGOs and other third sectors, which can really support facilitation of knowledge or bridge these communication gaps that often municipalities have with the local community. So this can really help with this building of the relationship. And we are also, of course, talking about local residents, but also the local community as a whole, such as the passerbys, users of that space, students, and of course, at risk and vulnerable groups, such as people with less advantage, migrant population, as well as elderly and children. Yeah, so how do we actually set up this collaborative environment? Because it's quite a lot of people, and we need first then to understand how to identify those people and how to identify those actors. The best way is definitely through stakeholder mapping, but often city representatives do not always have the resources or time to apply such techniques. So for this, we developed a simplified version with a set of questions that can guide you through this process. Here are just some samples. We have a little bit more in a more detailed version in the handbook. But for example, for internal actors, we have who in my department should directly work on this project, who has relevant knowledge, who will be responsible for everyday day-to-day coordination, or who will be responsible for the implementation, the realization of the project, because sometimes in some cities you do have a planning department, but who actually does the works can be maybe another department. So you always have to be thinking who actually is relevant for this, which departments also be directly affected. Maybe you have transportation lines in that area, you have electricity cables, you have housing. So you really have to really start thinking about this broader picture to understand who should be engaged. And when we talk about external actors, some examples of questions we have is who from the local community should be engaged, who might benefit from the intervention and deserve a voice, but is often left out of the participatory process. Because we find that often when we have just a normal call for participation, people who tend to participate are people who either is against the project or they already have an inclination for environmental issues and so on. So who is not there usually and should be there? And this is also a very important question to ask. And what are the different interests of various stakeholders in relation to this intervention? So you're also aware of potential conflicts or even synergies within the people you'll be engaging. And the how to engage is actually really important. For internal actors, we really recommend developing a cross-departmental working team where you can have bilateral or one-to-one meetings with different people of the municipalities or the official government in general, because here we're not just talking about the municipality, but maybe the regional government is also interested to be engaged and so on. But you also, within this cross-departmental working team, you also can have bigger, large assemblies where relevant issues, advancements, or even results from other meetings can be discussed. This seems to take quite a lot of time, but we learned from the experience of JUSTNature that it actually saves time in the long run and helps with the development of more concrete and relevant solutions. For example, we had examples in cities which you can read on the stories from the field here. I'm not going to go through that today, but that's in the handbook, where one of our cities, Leuven, really put a lot of effort to create this cross-departmental working team. In the beginning, this of course took time, but in the longer run, decisions were making much more quicker and also more connected because everybody was understanding the whole view of the projects, but also the points of the other different departmental groups involved. So if you have a problem of maybe the nature-based solutions or the was passing through a electrical line, then you have the people from the electricity department right there to say no, but this area may be free, and so on. So this makes the discussion much more easier, and this makes then the process on overall after this initiation much more faster and efficient. Now, for engaging and working with external actors, it is slightly different. Because usually, not always, cities have already a relationship with such actors, of all the actors that would be interested to be involved. You also might not have the trust, or they are not meeting. They are usually also not meeting the cities during their working hours. So here you really have to kind of build a relationship and approach each group thoughtfully, clearly communicate why you are reaching out and what can you provide, and listen to their needs to make sure that this is a two-way relationship and adapt your engagement process accordingly. This means that you might have to have engagements not really on your working hours, but on Saturdays, on evenings. And you also might need to provide incentives such as childcare or a little coffee break, or other things that makes this initial engagement attractive. And you definitely need to show that you are there, and you really take seriously their time and their engagement. And this is particularly true in the beginning. So showing up and demonstrating that you are there to work together is really, really crucial. Initial activities that you can have do not need to be necessarily already directly about designing or planning your intervention, but can be about building that relationship. And this can take many formats. For example, information sessions and chat sessions about why you are there, what you want to do with them, what you want to achieve, and so on. Community workshops, where you go on walks with your diverse people in the neighborhood, in the sites, to understand how do they see the area, what do they understand of the area, what are the problems, what are the needs and desires. We also have diverse thematic workshops that you could do, for example, exploring related topics such as biodiversity or gardening, can also be a composting or bird watching, just really to establish yourself within this new group that you are engaging. And lastly, storytelling or mapping workshops. Here, when I say map, is not stakeholder mapping, but really maybe a sensory mapping or emotional connections to the space and to the topic that you are working with. And this can really help advance further this process of collaboration. Now I will give the floor to Agnes, who we are happy to have with us today, to talk about her experience, practical experience in Szombathely in Hungary, engaging local actors. Agnes.
Thank you. Hi all. I'm going to talk about our two different circles of stakeholders. As in Szombathely, we had two project sites. We chose one primary school courtyard and a relatively close green area, which was rather underused and underdeveloped, not maintained at all. So both sites were, well, in a not very well developed part of the city, and we decided to have two stakeholder groups, because seemingly these two sites needed very different care and very different design of co-governance. So, of course, in the school, it was the school children that were in the focus. I mean, they are really the stakeholders of a primary school courtyard. So, in this stakeholder group, our task was relatively easy with inviting them. We asked the principal, the director of the school, to give us two the school groups from the 5th and 6th grade, and we worked together with them. Of course, when the principal says that you go at 4 o'clock today and participate in the stakeholder group, then all the school children were there. the other stakeholder group that we worked with on the park, it was very different. So we had a small green area that was very underused and not maintained. And actually, nobody went there. Nobody had the feeling that they belonged there. So it was very, very difficult to understand who is really a stakeholder, the proper stakeholder for the park. So we invited adults and experts, which is a very different type of group. We couldn't just say that you come tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to the stakeholder group. We had to put a lot more effort into the invitation to really have people coming. But they were adults and they were experts. So when they came, they worked excellently, and we had very lively and very meaningful stakeholder meetings. Let me speak about very shortly about the shortcomings in the school. Even though the children seemed to be interested, sometimes it wasn't easy to work together with them, because at least in Hungary, the school system is not very flexible, not liberal at all. It's very hierarchical, and so we experienced that the school children cannot really think out of the box. They didn't have ideas what to have in the courtyard. When we asked them, tell us what you would like to see in the courtyard, they didn't have anything to say. They were accustomed only to use what is there, but never to think what they would like to see there. So it was a new approach for them. I think it also mainly comes from the Hungarian society. It's a post-socialist country, and very hierarchical structure. It's a weak society. We have a small number of civil organizations, so it's not very common to experience this type of questions. What you would like to see somewhere? People are usually told what they will see. Here you see the result of the stakeholder groups' work, because these groups learned how to work, and also how to participate in the whole circle of co-governance. Here on the pictures you see the co-implementation phase. The picture on the left side is from the school courtyard. These are two boys from the 5th grade. They belong to an afternoon group, and you see the raised beds that they actually plant. Well, I don't exactly know what, but I will tell later more about this afternoon group. The picture on the right-hand side is from the park. Here you see the Miyawaki forest being planted by a local secondary school and by the Abud, which Abud was our partner in JUSTNature project. So here we really managed to implement co-implementation with young people from Szombathely and also from a project partner.
And we'll come back to Agnes later on, actually, to tell us more about how that initial stakeholder engagement translated into long-term collaboration. So part 3 is about developing a roadmap towards just collaborative governance. And in this regard, we began with the concept of theory of change, which is not a new concept. And in fact, we were building on work that had already been done in the Clever Cities project, a predecessor of ours, also looking at collaboration and connection with urban nature. And there they defined 5 components of a theory of change. So working from an existing reality or problem that you're trying to address locally towards a long-term overall objective. And in between, defining actions to get there. What strategies will you take to work towards your objective? What interim outcomes do you need to achieve on the way? And very importantly, what does success look like? So what kind of indicators will tell you whether you're progressing or not? We built on that work to essentially formulate an exercise for our city teams made up of 6 steps. And within the handbook, there's a lot more detail on these. I'm just going to very quickly fly through them. Firstly, defining a goal. Secondly, clear objectives that make that goal more concrete. So in the case of Just Nature, we had a very broad goal in terms of working towards more socially just urban greening. Working backwards from there, and here we have a little bit more information on each of these steps. Defining actions, prioritizing those actions because most likely resources are limited and you need to work out and discuss what might be the most effective actions. And then finally, defining ways to keep track of and monitor your progress. This is a very broad visual schematic of what a theory of change ultimately needs to look like in terms of the various components. And here's a more detailed look at a real objective that we had in the city of Munich in connection with the 2 greening interventions there, where you can see what your change pathway or your roadmap might look like. So objective at the top in orange, outcomes in green, and then in blue, the actions that are leading to those outcomes. So for simplicity's sake, we haven't shown indicators here, but in practice, each of those outcomes would be linked to 1 or more indicators of success. And throughout the handbook, we have linked different tools where there's a tool that can support you with this. Theory of change is quite complex, so I have to address it very superficially today. But we did create within the project a digital whiteboard using the Miro platform. And here you see just an example of a tool, how it's represented in the guide, brief description, the purpose and when to apply it. And for every tool, we also have a particular working template that's linked. So in this case, the Miro board, digital whiteboard of how to create a theory of change. And that includes some guidance, some overall guidance on how to do such an exercise, ideally with your team, and some working boards outlining those very same steps that I showed you earlier, and with workspaces also to fill out and develop your own change pathway or roadmap. So this is something that you can do online, but you can also do manually with butcher's paper and flip charts sitting in a room together. Okay, so on to part 4, our final part, implementing your roadmap. And there's also a lot of detail in the handbook on this, very broadly broken down into 3 parts: spatial planning and co-design, building and planting, and management. And here again, I'll just draw attention to a couple of key things. Firstly, as Via already introduced, when engaging with different stakeholders, this does create some complexity in terms of the voices that you're hearing from. In that sense, it's very important to set up a mechanism, an approach for collecting that data and dealing with it. And in particular, I want to highlight I guess the issue of expectation management, that once you're collecting ideas, there needs to be a clear process for how those ideas will be selected and prioritized, that decisions are documented. It's often not possible to put everything into practice. If that's the case, then understanding why and having a rationale for that and making sure to communicate that back to your participant group is really important. In terms of the building phase, which is also usually a planting phase for an urban greening project, this can be one of the more challenging phases actually for collaborative governance. There's often a lot of rules involved as to why it's not possible to involve people more broadly. There might be insurance issues, there might be safety issues or quality control. This is one of the things that we deal with in the handbook that we discuss. And there's a story from the field there in connection with the Munich experience working with kids. And because we have Alice Ryle with us today, I'd like to hand over to her to say more about her experience in Munich.
Thank you very much, Ellen, and hello also from my side. I'm Alice Ryle and I work for the Green and Open Space Planning Unit in the city of Munich. So essentially here you see sort of content put into the theory of change approach, the whiteboard that Eleanor just showed. And we sort of took this as a basis to really, first of all, define our outcomes. Like we had an objective of that people of all sorts and walks of life essentially use the courtyards more, and that they're open and inclusive to as much people, to as many people as possible. And then from that, we wanted to see, okay, what are our outcomes that could help us achieve this objective. And one of them was that essentially the nature-based interventions at the school are used by different groups, children as well as teenagers, because the schoolyard we focused on within the inner city of Munich is used by both a primary school and a secondary school. So essentially kids between the ages of around 10 all the way up to 19, and around 1,000 students who theoretically at least use the schoolyard. And we wanted to show how a temporary redesign of that space could, on the one hand, help show sort of an immediate change, which could be also experienced by the students, but essentially going through that very co-creative process, how that could impact a long-term nature-oriented redesign of the schoolyard, which essentially the St. Anna School was a pilot school for, because the city of Munich, as of 2022, really had the vision of, on the one hand, making the schoolyards more nature-oriented, particularly those within the inner city, which is a very densely built city, but also opening up the schoolyard. So essentially, this was one of the outcomes that we achieved, and then we were in the next step sort of looking, okay, what do we do? How do we actually get there? And that brought us to the actions, which you can see on the right side of this diagram, where we essentially jotted down different possibilities how to make sure that the intervention would be used by different kids of different ages. So one of the first things that we decided to do, okay, instead of us going there and sort of presenting different ideas, we really wanted to conduct an ideation workshop with the kids. But it was pretty clear, of course, that with 1,000 pupils in the schools, we could definitely not involve all of them. So one of the ways we went about it is to really work with the contact teachers in both schools to see, on the one hand, which kids would be interested in joining, but also how to involve them, because the course, the curriculum is very tight. So there's not that much space to just say, hey, we've got this time slot, please come along. But we really needed to see, okay, where could be essentially link up to the school curriculum to, for example, take over a time slot where the kids had biology or nature and technology, in the case of the secondary school, and conduct an ideation workshop there, which we did using different tools, sort of digital apps, but also interviews and photography to really allow them to share, also visually share their ideas. From that, we sort of had a catalog, you could say, a board of different ideas, which and there were very interesting ideas there, from tree houses to very different greened areas to lots of options to either just sort of linger, but also play and even study outside in the schoolyard. And essentially, we prioritized some of them together with colleagues from other departments, because you really, as Eleanor said at the beginning, you needed to look at the safety aspect, what can or is not possible. You needed to look at, because it's a very tight schoolyard, where to position things. And then we had sort of a design concept put up, which we presented to parts of the school, again, mostly those pupils who participated in the ideation workshops. And from that, essentially, which you can see here, we developed different formats in which we wanted to engage with the students so that they would essentially, on the one hand, learn more about nature and the space, the schoolyard, which is essentially theirs, but they might find different angles to it. And also what we could actually do there, so they would really have this ownership in terms of, you know, understanding, okay, this is my space, I can do things, I have agency to do things there. So we had different planting events with primary school kids, but also younger secondary school kids, where they sort of learned about the plants, what grows where, how to plant them, and really sort of had little raised beds where they could then, over the course of the school year, grow their vegetables. But we also had other aspects, looking at a workshop, looking at sort of favorite spaces and not very well liked spaces in the school year, to understand after the change, the temporary change that we did, like how that impacted how the students perceive the schoolyard, where they like to be, where not, and what ideas they had for that. Here we essentially gathered some experiences that we made throughout this approximately 1.5 to 2 year long process, where we really worked on the ground in the schoolyard, because there were quite a few things that were challenging. For example, I said we couldn't reach all the students anyways, but things like data protection, how the school communicates internally, like how the project's goals and the activities that we have, how does that reach the rest of the school family? That, for example, was one challenge. But there were also surprises that how different teachers, for example, engaged. There were some who were so grateful that we essentially came in and offered this opportunity to their pupils, but then there were others where they were like, their capacity is so low that they really didn't know how to essentially engage within the project. So I think here some of the key ideas that we really got within this process, with the idea of sort of having as many pupils as possible using the schoolyard, was that sort of taking a playful, creative approach is really something that works much better than conveying hard facts. For example, how climate change works and what does that mean for the school year, but really finding a way, for example, where is it hot, where is it cold? Are you in the shade more in the hot summer? Or how do you sort of, maybe how does your use of the school year change as well? But we also needed to look into sort of how do we actually communicate what we wanted to achieve with this project? What's the story that we had? Which, of course, the way you do that is very different from if you want to tell that story to a 10-year-old kid rather than a young adult of 19 towards the end of the secondary school. And of course, I said we couldn't engage everyone, so we really needed to be very strategic about how we could share the project and still have sort of a local impact and really get the feedback. And what really, I think, was a surprise for me, that we needed much more time to sort of understand, stick to regulations, but also sort of overcome some of the regulations, which of course very tight with minors using the space. And that was something that we needed to maneuver and essentially plan with and go back to regularly. So I think that was some of the things. And I think if we particularly look at co-governance, while we need to be aware that a project like that is maybe a short term, like 1.5 years. And of course, we want to convey content as well. But I think the subtle impact of such activities in terms of students being asked their opinion, students maybe looking at things differently, I think the subtle impacts are also something that are very important when thinking about sort of how to set up, how to implement co-governance activities. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alice. And then just to finish up, I'd like to give the floor back to Agnes to say a bit more about the long-term possibilities for engaging with school groups.
Yeah, in the school in Szombathely, we were really very lucky because maintenance is usually difficult. Everybody's happy when a project starts and when it ends, and wow, some very nice is created. But then comes the question, who will maintain it? And as it usually costs money, it needs a lot of work and so on. So in the school, I said we were lucky because there is an afternoon group for school children. A teacher is responsible for this afternoon group. They meet once every school week. And well, they start cooking and baking. And this lady teacher was enthusiastic about using the raised beds because she said that she would love to grow herbs and lavender and spinach and onions. And so this is what happens in the raised beds now. And I can say that this is the end of the second year that they use the raised beds. And it is really a success because today morning I contacted the teacher, and she said that the school children do love the raised beds and the afternoon group. And what I definitely want to tell you that now it sounds as if it's really a success story, but it didn't start. It didn't start this way. First, the teacher who leads this afternoon group said that, oh no, she wouldn't really like it. It will be extra work for her. And it turned out that they are so underpaid that the teachers do not want to have even one extra minute in the school. So we decided that we need to find some money in the project budget to give a tiny extra payment to the teacher. And so this is what we did. But imagine this amount was so little. It was like 1,000 euros for a whole year. It's not really a big amount. It only represented that we value her work, that we really appreciate what she does for the raised beds, for the children, for this afternoon group, and for the project as well. And she understood it, and she became really very well host of the raised beds, and so now we keep receiving the stories and pictures of the afternoon group. So what I really wanted to tell you that whenever you think of basically any development, it's very important to think about maintenance, and don't be afraid of trying to find unusual ways of securing the maintenance, because this also leads to success. Thanks. Yeah, here you see two more pictures about the results of the gardening. And yeah, I mentioned you the first key component, the small fee, and the second one was also the school's interest to have the raised beds, because they became famous. for the raised beds. It was really the school's interest to have something that they can be proud of. And by now, other two schools in Szombathely also created raised beds, and we hear that gardening and raised beds became buzzword for parents when they want to choose a school for their young kids. Yeah, so this is, I think, became a success story, but it didn't necessarily started as a success. Both the school and I think both we at the municipality, we worked hard for it, and let's hope that it will be like that for another some years. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Agnes. I love hearing you tell this story because every time there's something new that comes up for me, and yeah, it's so great to hear about the established success of this very small project, but with an impact that I think is much bigger than its physical size. Yeah, that brings us to the end of the formal presentation part. You'll find more information on our website and the link to the full handbook as a PDF download. And please, if you're interested in knowing more or following up on any of the experiences mentioned today, our email addresses are here. Please feel free to get in touch.
So I would like to thank you all for being with us today. Thank you to the public. As you know, Eleanor has shared some emails from us if you would like to reach out. There's also the website of the JUSTNature Project where you can find more information about the project, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or comments. Thank you.